Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad of Delaware, together with my co-host Mark Gronich of Statewide News Service and jbiztechvalley.com. We have a very, very special guest with us, Assemblyman Pete Lopez. Can I call you Pete?
Please,
First name is Pete.
Yep, prefer
welcome
that.
Welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you.
Now, you have a very big district.
I do.
And you might want to tell us a little bit about it, or the people in it, or maybe there's not so many people, that's why they give you so much.
Yeah,
And the show's only half hour, so when you
Oh dear, you guys are tough already. Okay. It's a 7-county region, largely rural, so Mid-Hudson, Northern Catskills, Southern Tier. And I have Schoharie, Delaware, Otsego, Ulster, Greene, Columbia, and part of Albany County.
That's a lot of area.
It is. It's bigger than the state of Rhode Island by square mileage. And I do about 1,000 miles a week in it. And it's a privilege. And you're right, probably more cows than people, or certainly more trees than people. Mm-hmm. It's beautiful, though. It's forests and mountains and pastoral farm fields, small communities. It's really, truly beautiful.
You're in the assembly, and you got obviously so many, I don't know what the percentage mark of New York City assembly people. So, I mean, do you have any, like, maybe, I don't know if conflict's the right word, or friction between, hey, I'm representing maybe the farmer and the person out there, and you're inside the big city.
Yeah, I would say there is
different issues.
There is a challenge, and there are 150
assemblymen.
150 assembly members. So when you think about that,
and there's like 106 Democrats.
Right. So 150 assembly members. So when you think about this, Assembly District 1 begins on Long Island. And you don't break 100 until you get past Westchester. So 100 in that greater metropolitan area. Then you add inner city Buffalo, Rochester, Syracuse. The number of those representing rural areas is small. But by population, there are roughly 2.5 million people living in our rural areas by state definition. And if we were a state, the state of rural New York, we would probably be close to the 25th state in the nation by population. So,
25th largest state in the nation.
Yeah, so back to your question, our challenge is being overshadowed by predominantly urban interests, and that's part of a challenge. Culture, philosophies, we have to balance that out. So as I work with the community, I come from a diverse background. I'm half Puerto Rican, Miami born, English, Scotch, Dutch, German, upstate country boy, go figure. I'm the Juan Epstein of the State Assembly. And so as a result, I have the ability to reach into those populations because we work by issue.
And before you were an assemblyman, you were Schoharie County Clerk.
True.
And that was your first elected position.
Well, I did serve as a local official at the town and village level, really volunteer. In rural areas, I think probably salary-wise, it's sometimes less than $1,000
for the year.
In some cases, sometimes more, and you do that part-time. You do your full-time job.
Well, even the assembly is part-time.
By definition.
By definition.
But I work full-time. I work more than full-time.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I wanted to have you talk about what committees you're on.
Sure.
If you could just run down what committees you're on.
Let me think through. So environmental conservation, education, agriculture.
And the ranker on?
Food, Farm, and Nutrition Task Force. I'm also on Hazardous Waste Task Force.
And you were given a leadership position in the Republican conference?
Yeah, I'll be a deputy minority leader.
Yay.
Coming in as that.
Give you a mazel tov.
Yeah, mazel tov. But it's a privilege, and we just do our best.
Do you know what your ranking is in the how senior you are?
Oh, I don't know.
You don't know.
I feel very young.
But you're in
Mark will tell you over here.
But you're in the middle of the pack. You're certainly, because there's such a turnover. You're moving up relatively quickly.
Yes.
How many years are you in the assembly?
Seven years. So it goes quickly.
This is the 2014 will be your 8th year?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. And we run on 2-year cycles.
Right.
So up again in 2014. So in terms of numbers, I don't know. We've had quite a bit of turnover. So I would say probably middle of the pack, or maybe in the upper third by now, which to me is startling.
It
I've
is.
never thought
8
about
years
that.
It's a short time to be.
Yeah.
Should there be term limits other than the 2 years that the voters elect?
You guys are unloading with the heavy questions. I am on bills that would call for term limits, and to be honest, I don't believe that individuals should look at it as if it's some entitlement, that they should be entitled to be in office like nobility. You know, we have many who are sons or daughters of former Congress members or members of the judiciary or landed gentry, and I don't subscribe to that. To me, it should be a grassroots democracy. So back to your term limit piece, I am on bills that would call for term limits.
Of what year cutoff? How many years?
Wow, I think there's some, they vary.
But what would your preference, if you had to write the bill, what would you?
I would say no more than 10 years.
10 years, that's what I think.
10 is plenty.
Yeah.
I think there's some 8, some 12.
Because if you can't get something done in 10 years, you're not going to get it done, and you can hand it off to someone. And
well,
I mean, it
I
takes
understood, but to me, the premise is how engaged are you, and how willing are you to advance ideas and work with people and put coalitions together. When you think about what we've been through, say in the last 5 or 6 years, it's been a staggering array of issues, particularly from an economic standpoint.
Well, and from your personal experience with Tropical Storm Irene and Lee.
Irene and Lee,
Right.
and Sandy hit part of my district.
Right, but your house was personally damaged.
My parents were homeless. My sister was homeless. My staff. We were robbed and flooded just this summer, so it was a long summer for us. So our community is very fragile in that regard. And then add the prolonged recession and the pressure. Much of my region, by definition, is northern Appalachia, under federal definitions. So rural poor.
Yeah.
And so prolonged recession, flooding, then name any other number of issues, pipelines,
I think
power
there's more to
lines.
say about experience, though. I mean, I know the issues. I want to bring out that, I guess with Jewish law, because it's obviously what I'm more familiar with, experience counts, and you get wiser with. I know there's a negative issue to that also. No, but there is something to say. There is no term limits.
There's something to be said for an institutional memory.
True.
And that's where staff comes in.
And
that's where, and a lot of it is that the staff really does, I don't want to say run the show, but give sage advice to their legislator and the person who they're working for. But the elected official, the one who the voters have to choose, personally, I believe, like Pete does, that we should have 10 years, that's it, 5 terms, and you try to groom a successor, you try to have a bullpen, you try to have the next crew coming up, because there's also something to be said for technology advances, and some of these legislators, I mean, they had to learn how to text. They didn't know how to text before it was fashionable. Now everyone has an iPod, or they have a flat screen in front of their desk, and some people grouse about it, because it's a distraction. Talk about distracted driving, this is distracted legislating.
Yeah, and I guess part of my take on it too is, irrespective of time in office, really is how substantively engaged is the individual. Do they represent their community? Are they in touch with the concerns and issues of their neighbors, their communities, their families? And are they truly representing? There are many who are wonderful, upstate, downstate, regardless of gender, regardless of ethnicity.
Or party affiliation.
Religious belief, just wonderful people. And then there are others who, to be honest, have other agendas, more self-serving, some window dressing. They'll make an appearance, but they truly don't understand the issues, and some are not inclined to be engaged in them. So the term limit piece, to me, is a significant threshold because it signals turnover and it signals new blood. But truthfully, to me, the ultimate measure is how sincere is the individual about doing their job, and how engaged, how much do they truly care about the people they serve, and are willing to put themselves into it.
You could see some people just sit in their chair and vote, and they don't get up and debate.
Correct.
But those are as few as the folks who get bounced out also, or choose to move on. Now, here as an example, the legislature is a part-time job, $79,500 plus whatever you get for a committee assignment, chairing a committee.
Right.
And, just in the past year, which was an off-election year for the state legislature, 2013, we had 9 legislators leave the assembly out of 150 members. And like Pete was saying earlier, this was something that is a higher turnover than during an election year.
True.
And they,
True.
you know, you had some folks, you had two folks go to this New York City Council. Third tried to run for city council. I don't think he made it. But then you had others who wanted to go for other
Well, you have to
positions.
remember, I talked to a few assemblymen in the past years, and one of the things is maybe Pete doesn't feel it or so much because he's local, but you know, you have a job every week, even New York City, to get to Albany, which of course we're the capital. Then it's 3 hours, Long Island, who knows, four and a half, Buffalo.
Jamestown is the longest. Jamestown is the longest schlep
Yeah.
coming from Jamestown.
It is a schlep. So every week, who wants to, you know, so then say, well, you can get to say a nice position in your hometown.
Right.
You know, you have to think, I wouldn't want to also 3-4 hours every week back and forth.
Away from your
You know,
families, away from
yeah.
your community.
I mean,
Sure.
you know, you look at what Bill Parman
Right.
from Jamestown, he drove back and forth for 20
He
years.
did. Yeah.
Yeah,
He was
20
closer
years.
to Ohio than he was
He
to the
wa-
state
absolutely,
capital.
absolutely. In fact, many people in Jamestown go to Ohio because they don't have a clothing tax. So they could drive to Ohio to do their shopping,
Oh.
Really?
and then they come back. Yeah, they got to go through a little piece of Pennsylvania, but then they get to Ohio very quickly.
So
So,
that's what I'm saying.
yeah.
There's another factor in there also. I mean,
True.
If you have the same kind of, say the money isn't that good, and you might as well stay at hometown and get another kind of position like that.
you know,
There's
the representative before Bill Parman in Jamestown was Raleigh Kidder, and he was there for 10, 15 years. So, you know, there are
The right
certain
kind of people.
there are
Right.
certain people who just want to get out of town.
But,
But in New York City, in New York City, they just have a lot to offer. They have a lot there, and you know, I spoke to an assemblyman from Queens that I happened to go to college with, and he was in the assembly for many years, and he just said, you know, my wife. You know, we just had another kid. My wife wants me home more. You know, you know, and he went and ran for the city council, and his brother ran for his assembly seat, and they switched seats. You know,
Wow.
it's city council and the assembly. You know who it is. Yeah. So I just had this. You know, and that's what's going to happen now. We got another thing with term limits in New York City Council. Now you have people leaving to go to Albany, and then people from Albany going and switching with their counterparts in the city council. And they do that, you know. So
I don't know if
it's a
bad
game.
thing, yeah.
It's a game, you
You know,
know.
Pete, one of the committees you just spoke about that you were on was education. And
Yes.
I know in our little school, my Maimonides, our day school, and I'm not that involved, but I know the English, the secular teachers were upset. They don't have money for books, and they said the textbooks cost money in our little day school, you know, and they don't provide for it. So I don't really have a full idea of the pros and cons of it. I know people are upset. That's kind of what I know. If you could maybe.
You're not fundraising to ask Pete to pay for the books. I'm hard on
You're
him,
good. You
too.
guys are tough on each other, too. I feel better. You guys are picking on each other, too. That's good. I would say to you, in terms of education, to me, I value education. So whether it's private, whether it's secular, whether it's religious-oriented, and to me, education is what lifts our people up, gives them opportunity, opens their eyes, gives them a role in the world, gives them a future. And so I'm very interested and very vested in ensuring that every young person have the ability to reach their full potential. And so on the educational scene, there's been so much upheaval as of late. Funding cuts, particularly precipitated by the recession, changes in policy from Washington and Albany. And what I find is that many of our institutions are destabilized. So financially, curriculum-wise. So most recently, the latest uproar has been over the Race to the Top funds, which has included teacher evaluations, the APPR they call it, the charter school enlargement, the
Common Core, yeah.
which has been the most recent, really was the summer sleeper, so to speak.
And what are your thoughts? I mean, you've been to these hearings that have been held by
yes.
the Education Commissioner and the Chancellor and the Regent for this area. So, you know, you've heard the complaints.
Yeah.
But is there anything that could really be done at this point?
Oh, absolutely there is. And when you think about it, we'll use Common Core as the focus. That was precipitated by the state's engagement in receiving federal funds with the condition that they embrace this new curricula. So we have an option. We could continue to participate or not in the broad scheme of things and say, if we're not happy with this direction, we opt out. And then whatever funding goes with it, we set aside or return, however that works. The alternative is to look at the Common Core itself, which has many facets to it, and begin to dissect it. For example, one of the most offensive is a requirement that personal data, individual data, names and birthdays, social security numbers, be uploaded to a cloud, to the cloud, so to speak, and to be provided to third-party contractors who we
Independent
understand,
contractors who have no business having that
and
information.
who will take that private information, personal information, and then use it to market and use it to develop products. And so in that mix, in the Common Core, very offensive, there has to be an immediate stop. We have to immediately force them to eliminate that provision.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't realize that, but I hear
in Bloom, it's funded by the Gates Foundation and other philanthropic groups and other organizations.
And I hear like parents saying, "Oh, my child comes home crying," and you hear all these sob stories. And I just feel like if we went to the dumbing down in the lowest common denominator, so these kids didn't come home crying, where would we be?
Well, there's,
I mean, we're kind of stretching
there's
the intellectual.
There's a logic to it, but part of the issue is, in terms of the curriculum, what's happened is that it's such a massive change in the teaching style. And the best analogy we've heard from those in the field is that we're trying to fly the airplane as we're building it.
Oh.
So changes in vocabulary, changes in focus, changes in methodology. So when you're doing math, you're not subtracting, you're digesting numbers. So even changes in the verbiage. And what we've heard in Common Core is that much of the text content is not age appropriate.
Well, that I heard, yes.
We've also heard concerns that when a student takes a test, overly subscribing to testing methodologies, that parents and teachers are not able to access the test data for their own individual child or student.
But it's also something where these are optional. The school district has the option as to whether to determine, the school board, I guess.
Well, here's something I think we all would agree with, is certainly in any educational setting, we want to maximize parental consent and parental involvement and parental engagement.
Okay.
I think we do.
I guess we do.
I do.
Okay.
You know, if I'm a parent.
I'm not sure the parents are,
in all the
especially in New York City, the parents are not very involved and engaged.
Well, to the extent that we're vested in the content and invested in some of the direction that our schools may be heading in. So there may be issues or direction that we don't subscribe to. And in many cases, they may be driven by cultural or religious beliefs.
Now, I look at it this way.
You follow what I'm saying?
I look at it that there's a triangle.
Yes.
And it's P plus P plus P. Parents, professionals, and peers.
Okay.
Parents, professionals, and peers.
Sure.
And the weakest link is the downfall of the child. If all three links are strong, you will have a strong, a well-educated student. But if he gets in with the wrong crowd, his peers, he's going to sink. If he gets a bad teacher who's lazy, he's going to sink. And if he doesn't have the right parents to be able to teach him and help him and boost him on the times that he's not in school, then he's going to sink. So you got to have the peers, professionals, and parents in there.
So
and that's why I look at it.
Let me go back to the curriculum. So embedded in this package of Common Core are elements that I feel are impediments. If a student, a parent, or a teacher is not able to look at the specific scoring and the student's performance on a test, how does that professional, how does that parent target their energies to strengthen the student in areas where the student is underperforming? So to me, that's counterintuitive. So part of it is the content. So how rigorous is the math? How rigorous is the English? How rigorous are the other components? That's one element. The other piece is what aspects of education are being used to reinforce or detract from the ability to target the resources as needed for the entire cohort, but also for the individuals, to strengthen the individual's ability to maximize their potential. one aspect too that to me is lacking is the ability to provide work to school or school to work, excuse me, education. Right now, everyone is on a college-bound track, and we know from experience that not everyone is ready for college. Not everyone wants to go to college.
When I graduated,
But they may have technical skills.
I got to tell you, when I graduated from high school, most of my friends either didn't go to college, most of the students in my class, I should say, either didn't go to college, went to Kingsborough Community College, or went to Brooklyn College, and it was myself and one other student that went away to a university.
Right.
That's scary. And when I got up here, believe it or not, my teachers, my college professors said, no one taught you how to write. I mean, they were flabbergasted. They said they were, and this back in the late 70s, where they were crying the same thing that we're still crying today, 35 years later. So what, you know, in 35 years, I mean, you talk about building the plane as you're flying it,
right.
But 35 years, we've been hearing these complaints of people going to college not knowing how to write. I'm one of them. I learned how to write through my college professors. I woke up. And, you know, hence the...
I always, because I have like 10 hats, I have, of course, the television show, but I have like 10 different jobs, and one of them's going to prison, and of course they want, you know, the system is, I mean, right, to educate these people. Without an education, what else you're going to do is just go on the street and sell drugs. But on the other hand, it's like what you say, and then I see them, because the religious section is in they call it the education wing in prison, so it's the classrooms and the religion. So I see what they're teaching, and I says, you know, these kids just don't need algebra, geometry, you know, the cosine and this sine and the tangent.
Sure.
You got to have, you know, and they're
They
talking
need
these
addition and subtraction and multiplication.
And like you say, these kids aren't ready.
But if you
No,
but if you go ahead and you relate it to them, they know the metric system because they know grams of cocaine and they know grams and they know, you know, grams of heroin, and I'm serious. I mean, they know this stuff cold.
So
but,
let's go back to the mathematics. So
Yeah.
now it's applied mathematics where they can put it into a job skill. Maybe
Right.
it's working on some sort of machinery. Maybe it's working on doing a CAD/CAM system. You know, so taking the skill set. So some students are very tactile. They need something more physical, something in front of them. They can see the application. Then they have some ownership, and it may be more experiential. So my take on it, what's missing in this whole piece is how can we ensure that our educational options avail themselves to the needs and the strengths of the individual? And I have my daughter wanted to be an artist. God bless her. Four colleges, short break, working, another college, and only has a 2-year degree. She's going to go into the armed services and develop some more technical skills. And in her case, the issue is how employable will she be if she doesn't have the right skill set? One of her peers had gone into electrical work and pursued study at Hudson Valley, and now is a lineman for National Grid, making $50,000 a year.
which isn't
to
really
start.
a great salary.
To
but
start.
it's to start, you know.
When you have many who are unemployed and are working close to minimum wage.
Let me just move on to another
Sure.
topic because I just want to get in. Is that okay?
Yeah,
Reverend?
fine, because we're going to be running out of
You're the
time.
ranker of the farm.
And I'd love to come back again.
You
So let
will.
me know.
You will. You will.
Love to.
We always have room. You're the ranker on Food, Farm, and Nutrition Task Force.
Yes,
You
yes.
recently had a hearing. What did you learn? What were the concerns? What, in a nutshell, what did people come and talk to you about?
My sense is that there's a shared interest, increasing interest in agriculture, and particularly and we have two dialects. So we have one constituency that talks about agriculture in terms of economic multipliers and dollars generated at the farm gate and unit productivity. So that's one culture. Another culture talks about safe food, local food, carbon footprint, 100-mile diet. And what I find is they're speaking the same language, just different dialects. The common denominator, back to your earlier phrase, is the family farm. So what I learned from that is that there's intense focus and a desire because of these value sets and the importance placed on these two philosophies to come together and try to do something that strengthens agriculture, i.e. family farms. So the public hearing was an eye-opener because it shows me that there's an ability to reach back into the inner cities, reach back into the suburbs, and develop coalitions
Okay.
that will be driven to support family farms. And that was my biggest takeaway from that hearing. And that's how I'm going to approach it.
And what was the subhead? What was the title of the hearing? What were you trying to?
Yeah, it was focused. It was family farm focused.
So family farm. Okay.
And
Now, do you didn't get into industrial like Chobani or anything like that?
it did come up.
Oh, it did
come up, and so part of that premise is how do we grow the industry? So part of it is providing greater opportunity for our products, raw production, to receive value-added processing, create more jobs, create more wealth in the community, create more opportunity. So the Chobanis came up in that regard. The other piece, though, that came up in the Chobani discussion was ensuring that the price paid to the farmer is sufficient to keep the family in operation and encourage additional investment.
Again,
so that was a weakness that
that's
came
a
up.
30-year weakness. I mean, that's come up every time I go to a Farm Bureau conference. I mean, that's something.
Oh, he sounds like a cynical, old, jaded son of a gun over here. He does.
Farm safety.
Yeah, but here's my take on that. Is you're absolutely right. And the dialogue in Albany tends to be cyclical. But the question is, we're seeing this come back to us, but what do we do about it? So clearly, farmers continue to age. Agriculture continues to decline. So we're seeing 30 years of decline. So the question is, when, as a community, do we step in and make a meaningful change in taxation policy, in regulation, in marketing, in giving?
We had a big problem with milk for a while in the 80s and 90s. We had a problem with milk, and the farmers not getting the price for milk that they had wanted or that they should be getting.
Right.
So they started cooperatives.
Sure.
And over multi-states. Vermont also came into the New York cooperative, and it was multi-state. It was like a New England cooperative. So, I'm just thinking that we had a resolution to that. I don't hear the crying so much from the dairy farmers.
It's there.
But it's not as loud.
Here are the challenges.
As, oh my gosh, we got all these cows.
Take this young man to school on agriculture policy.
Right.
So here are the challenges. Increased globalization.
Yeah.
Increased processing of milk products, which are being used in much of our food sources. So not in kosher, but in non-kosher foods in particular. Milk protein substitutes, things coming from China, dairy cartels that are now global. And our farmers are price takers. So here we are importing much of the food and fiber that we rely on in New York State. And we see the decline of agriculture still in this community. So the premise is many of these co-ops have been co-opted. I know you'd like that.
Yeah, I
threw that at you.
That was good.
They've been co-opted by larger global cartels who are driving price and production out of New York.
Right.
So our challenge is within this 30-year view that you highlighted is what are the changes? What are the changes in technology? What are the changes in marketing? What are the changes in competitive forces at work? And how are we responding to give people what they want, which is local, wholesome food produced by our family farms? So it gives us a new reason for engagement.
Well, absent term limits, 30 years from now, I want you to come back.
It's got to be sooner than that. It's got to be sooner than that.
And we want to bring this up again in 30 years.
So as a close.
Yeah, because I have...
So back to dairy farms.
Yes.
So as I talk to these people about Chobani and milk price, which now fluctuates greatly because we don't have a floor, the subsidies have been removed at the federal level. So wild fluctuations. I said to a family in Walton, Delaware County, geez, we're so eager to keep your family farm going. And the woman said, we'd like our daughter to continue in farming, but we're telling her no. And by the way, we're going school shopping at the Salvation Army. So is that the standard of life that we want for our family farms, who we value? It's at that level.
Well, here's an assemblyman told me this story. He said, when you think of New York State, most people think of New York State, they think of the skyscrapers, the bright lights on Broadway, and the Statue of Liberty. He says, let me tell you what the real New York State is. The silos are our skyscrapers, the bright lights in the milking barn at 5 a.m. are the bright lights of New York, and the liberty to farm one's own land is the liberty of New York State. And I just thought that was a beautiful thing, and I've been saying that for 30 years, but it's just incredible. So I just I do love agriculture in the state. It is a passion of mine. The family farm needs to exist, and I see that, and I'm glad that you're in there keeping an eye on everything and making sure that could happen. So thank you for that, because we need that.
We need more help.
So anyway.
Well, Pete, we just want to give you the blessing that you should continue doing the good work and sticking up for the people of New York. And I don't know what Mark with his term limits, but we should give you a long, successful career.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Okay, thank you for coming.
My pleasure. Thank you.